We're live. So, hello, Sofia. Welcome back to This Fictions. This Fiction in French.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you for having me. Thank you to everyone who has made this event possible.
And we're here again to talk together. Friday, we talk about writing. Today, we're going to talk about reading. Yeah?
Oh.
We're the first start. Hello, Sofia.
Hello, good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine. I should say good afternoon. It's afternoon for you. It's morning for me.
So I'm happy to have you again here at This Fiction in French. You see, I meant the same jokes again and again.
That's fine. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who made this event possible.
So when we met Friday, we talked about writing. Today, we're going to talk about reading and all the endless possibilities and the different way to read and the different things to read. And I hope we'll have a big pile of books to read at the end of this discussion.
Me too.
You are frozen. It's very strange. I can see what you're doing and when you will be talking. I wanted to ask a first question, which will be, I think, the continuity of this discussion. And this question is actually, what is a story?
Wow, that is a huge question. I will tell you how I think about it. I think of a story as a kind of creative reinterpretation of reality. And that means it can have so many different forms. It does not need to be written. It does not need to take the form of language. You could have a story that is images. You could have a story that is sound. But what is happening in a story is that you are a person. You are born into this world. You didn't make it. So there are certain things that you have that you cannot change. For example, your language. You're born into a language, right? So these things are given to you. And the story is your creative reinterpretation of the things that are given. That's my most kind of general definition. Now, I have a different one for the novel specifically. I have a favorite definition of the novel. I didn't make it myself. This definition comes from a scholar named M.H. Abrams, who was writing, I believe, in the 1950s. And this was in a dictionary of literary terms or something. And the definition of the novel is a written work of a certain length having something wrong with it. I love this definition. I think there's no better definition of the novel. It's a written work of a certain length. So length is part of it, having something wrong with it. If you write a book about geology or, a critical work, a book about politics, you could make sure that everything is correct, everything is perfect, the structure is excellent. If it's a novel, it will have something wrong with it.
That's very interesting. Because we talked about perfection Friday, and we said, no, don't be perfect, please.
Don't be perfect. Right.
No
yeah. So it really works with this definition of the novel. That's true.
Yeah, that's true. And it works too with short stories and different things. even the big ones.
Yes.
It's very interesting. So when you read a story, and I mean reading it, you accept that there will be something wrong in uh, very exactly the activity you are doing right now at the moment.
Yes, I think so. You accept and you expect imperfection, and it will be a necessary imperfection. In other words, it will be because in a work of fiction, there comes a point where if you are trying to make it perfect, if you continue and you say, there's a problem here, I have to fix this problem. When you fix that problem, you will create a problem somewhere else. Oh, now I have to fix this problem. I fixed it. Now I created a problem over here. So at some point, a writer has to decide, I have fixed all the problems that I need to fix. This problem over here, I will leave it there because this is a necessary problem. If I fix it, I'm going to lose something else. I'm going to lose something that's important to me. So my approach is to make sure I keep the things that are important to me, and that I know what the mistake is. I know what the problem is. And I'm saying, okay, I'm all right with that problem. I'm going to leave it there because if I keep trying to fix it, I'm going to mess up something that I don't want to mess up.
It makes me think of Borges, the Argentinian writer. He said one day, a poem doesn't need that all its verses to be perfect. It needs that there is at least one to be
Ah,
perfect.
yeah, that's nice. That's great.
That's great. So this imperfection, it's sometimes the problem between the reader and the writer. If the reader doesn't accept the imperfections the writer let, there is no contract and no trust between the reader and the writer.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. And I think if you read online reviews of fiction, you will see this repeated again and again. You will see a reader who says, this book, you know, I, I didn't get it. I didn't like, the central idea. I didn't like the structure. It will be something really major that from the writer's side, the writer is saying, I need to have it this way. And the reader is like, that didn't work for me. And definitely at that point, there is, as a reader, there's a feeling of kind of sinking down. I find it almost a depressed feeling, when I'm reading something and I'm like, I just I can't connect with what this writer is doing. Yes, I feel there's a breakdown of trust. I feel like, yeah, I'm not comfortable. And by contrast, when it's a writer that I connect with, I feel absolute trust. I'm just like, take me. I'll go wherever you're going. I'll go with you. I'm ready to go with you. And it doesn't mean that I don't see flaws in that writer as well. I can also see where, okay, this wasn't great. This wasn't perfect. This was a little weak, but at the base, I trust this writer. And then it's the opposite of depression. Then it's elation. I'm so happy. I'm ready to live in that space. And I'm grateful. Actually, what I feel is gratitude when I find a writer that I can trust and I'm ready to go along with. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, there is many filters between, we're going to speak about translation in a few minutes, but there is many filters between the writer and the reader. I'm thinking about the editor, even the publisher, and all the people who worked on it. What part does this people have in the bond, the trust between the reader and the writer.
Yeah, you're speaking about the whole team, the
Yeah,
kind of editor, the publisher, yeah,
yeah,
who really make the book an object that we can
yeah.
have. Yeah, can
It's
have
my
in our
101 in creative writing. You never write anything alone.
yes, yes. Well, this is an interesting one. Now, I don't know how it works where you are. Um, where I am, so in the United States, when I sell a work, I have a contract. And this means that the publisher has agreed to publish this book. And this is before the editing process begins. So we already have a contract. You are already publishing this book. This means any suggestions that the editor has for me are exactly that. They are suggestions.
Yeah.
I don't have to take any of them. If I want to, I can reject everything. I can, they can send me the whole manuscript with all kinds of changes, and I can say, no, 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 I'm not, I can refuse all of them. I have never done this because editors are extremely good readers. They're extremely good readers. They're very smart. And I have been fortunate to have editors who really, they like my work, they understand my work, and when they make suggestions, they are trying they're trying to let the work become itself or become a fuller version of itself. They're not trying to change it into something else. They're trying to sort of take its potential and develop it, or take, things that are present but unclear and help them to kind of be illuminated and become clear and become pleasurable and become intellectually stimulating. Yeah. So I love to have an editor to work with. Of course, I mean, my personal belief is that, while I'm working on something, while I'm writing the first draft, I don't show it to anyone. No one, not my nearest and dearest, not my husband, nobody. But once I have a draft, that's when I really need, perspectives from other people. And the best perspective that I can have is that of an editor who wants to publish this work, who is committed to this work, and wants it to really shine.
Yeah, it's a chain of trust, actually, really. I think that will be the big word of this conversation, but everything is based on trust. When I myself work as an editor, I finished one like 3 days ago. Really, really. I think the very, very most important thing is the trust the writer puts in me. The it's a girl, so she met something she finds good enough to show me, and she say, but you can have you can change things, you can suggest things. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect neither, but sometimes I think the writer thinks the editor is a more perfect reader than the writer. Do you have that feeling?
Mm,
I'm very proud of the way I read, frankly, but I'm not at ease with that idea that I feel sometimes, and also for the translations. Sorry, it's something so intimate.
yes, yes. Well, I think that, as a writer, it, it does help to have a certain amount of confidence, so that you can trust yourself. I mean, back to trust, right? To trust yourself to distinguish between, okay, this is a suggestion that really helps me and it helps my work and I should take it. And this is a suggestion that is not what I need, and I have to say no. And this is something that just develops with time. I think, as you become a more confident reader in your own work, you can more easily decide, okay, here I agree with the editor and here I don't. But I'll give you an example with my recent novella, The Practice, The Horizon, and the Chain. I have my editor at Tor.com is Ellie Goldman, and they are an excellent editor. And what they helped me to do was, um, when I talk about, okay, there's an imperfection and I'm happy with it, sometimes there are imperfections I'm not happy with and I don't see them. And so that's where an editor is extremely helpful, because the editor can see, somebody who can see those gaps where I think, well, I didn't want to make that mistake. I want to fix that, but I didn't see it. And what Ellie asked me when we were working on The Practice were world building details, actually, that were very important that I didn't think about. I was very focused on the characters and the relationships. And Ellie would ask me things like, so what about like the government on this spaceship? Like, what's that? What about the mining corporation? Is the government connected to the mining corporation? And I was like, wow, like, of course they are, how is the university connected to the mining corporation? Of course it's connected. But these were things I had not thought about. So it was so helpful to have somebody who can see those gaps. And then, that's not an imperfection that I want. I want to, put in some little hints about what are the connections between these different things. So that's, that's just one example of how that editor relationship and the role of the editor is really crucial in the finished work.
So let's come back to the reader, because you were talking about the people who write what they think about books on the internet. Is, in your opinion, a reader some sort of editor who can't change the text?
That's a great definition of a reader. I often feel that way when I'm reading. I'm like, this is great, but could you need to work on the dialogue. Like, all of your descriptions are so good, but this dialogue is so stiff and, it doesn't feel natural. Yeah, I think so. But I also think that when the reader is sort of an editor manqué, like an editor who didn't manage to actually be an editor, that's already a sign that the relationship between the reader and the writer has broken down. Because I don't feel that way when I am reading something that I really love. In fact, I am not aware. I don't have, my critical brain is not at that point, working or concentrating. I am immersed. I am, absorbed. I am completely sort of entranced and like hypnotized by what I'm reading when I'm reading something I really love. So it's not at that moment that I am making editorial comments in my head. So yeah, I think when we reach that point, and those reviews online are not usually reviews by people who loved the book. Very often they are, they have problems with it, and that's why they're making those comments. There are also many reviews that say almost nothing, and they're just like, I loved it. It was my favorite thing. We lose our words. We're much better at explaining in words why something is bad than why something is good. It's much more challenging.
That's why there is a star system. 1 star, 5 star. Yeah. Most of the time, it's my way to talk about it.
Yeah.
we're going to talk about translation right now because I'm thinking that when you read something, you said before we are born in a certain and specific language. When we read something which comes from another language, do we have the same reading experience than when we read something which was written in our own language?
For me, yeah, this is an interesting question. Okay, so I read in a couple of different languages. I read English, I can read French quite well, and I can read Arabic quite well. Other ones I struggle, but those three I read well. But it's very different for me than reading English to read a foreign language. Now, when I read a book that has been translated into English, actually my relationship to that text is the same as my relationship to any other text in English. I don't think about it. I don't think about that it was translated. I, most of the time, I receive it as if it is a text in my own language. But one of the reasons I love reading translated work is that there is something that is coming through that is different. So it is in my language. I receive it like any other English text, but it will have a special kind of, to me, a kind of liveliness, um, a, a slight, just a something like a twist or a very small, there will be nothing that's incorrect. It's correct English, but it will be just a little bit different, not quite the way that, a native speaker might speak the language. And that, I think that is an immensely important and powerful influence in literature. I think that, for centuries, people have been translating and reading translated work. And I think it enriches the literature of a language to have, these translated works that are just saying things in a way that's slightly different. And then you can see the influence come into, then people will begin composing in that language things that are inspired by these translated works.
You will never stumble sometimes when you read a translated work, like, oh my God, I don't think it's exactly what the authors meant.
I do stumble sometimes. I mean, of course, there are also levels within translation, and I also have my favorite translators. So when I read a work, if I have a choice of translators, I will, I have my favorites. For example, if I'm reading Russian literature, if there is a version translated by Constance Garnett, which there usually is because she was one of the early translators from Russian to English and she translated like everything, she's my favorite. And yes, there are, other versions, more recent translations that are considered more correct. For example, her translation of Anna Karenina is considered, that it has some mistakes. And there are more scholarly, more, academic translations, more recent translations that are considered better. But for me, there's a spirit or an atmosphere or a tone that Constance Garnett is capturing that I want. So even if, other people are critical or people who know Russian say, oh, she didn't get this line, that line right, I still like her the best. And that means that for me, when I see something in a translation that makes me stumble, it's not because I think it's incorrect. Usually it's because I think it's too correct. Yeah. And I think this person is really sticking close to that source language. Let's take Russian as the example. This is really sticking close to the Russian, and it's giving me very correctly and accurately what the Russian means. But I don't know Russian, and I don't care. I just want to read Tolstoy. So I want a smooth, immersive reading experience. And if something is not, formally accurate, um, to me, that is less of a problem than something that is too accurate. And I look at it and go, what? And then I've stopped reading. And now I'm not in Russia anymore. Now I'm in my house on my couch. Well, I didn't read this book to be in my house. I read this book to be in Russia in the 19th century.
Indeed, as a translator myself, I think tone is the most important. And it's great because you wrote a book about tone with Ken Zambrano, which is called Tone, and so on. So the question, you wrote a book to answer it, but what is tone? There is something at the very beginning of the book I really like. It's when you ask your students about the tone of, I don't remember which author, and they said it was a gray tone. But gray is not a tone, it's a color. What
Yeah.
does it mean? What is the feeling that gives the tone?
Yeah, this is such a fascinating subject to me. So the reason that my friend Kate and I decided to write this book is because we found that there is actually very little discussion of tone in literary criticism. A few people talk about it, but not many and not at length. Why? Because it is extremely difficult to define and even to find. Just to find it, where is it, is very difficult. People say, I know it when I see it. We can describe it. We can feel, yes, I know what you mean. But if you ask where in the words that are written on this page, where is the tone? It is incredibly difficult to find because it is both extremely small and extremely large. So tone exists both in the tiny nuances of words. Why did you choose this word instead of that word? For example, why did you choose gray instead of ashen? That's a very small nuance. But the tone is also global because the tone is also the overall impression of the work, meaning, the overall feeling or atmosphere that you feel when you read that work. So because it is so small and so big, it's almost like we can't grasp it. And in fact, when we wrote the book, our method was almost to enter into, so we read a number of books. The first one is Quicksand by Nella Larson. That's the one my students called Gray. And we read a series of books. Many of them are translated works. And we kind of try to enter into the tone, and it almost infects our own writing. So we begin to write, it's like a performance where we begin to write with the tone of the book that we're reading. Now, I did find it very interesting that my students said the tone of Quicksand, this novel from the Harlem Renaissance by Nella Larson, they said that it is gray. And yes, it's a color, it's not a sound. And that is a hint toward what tone is. That we use the word tone for it, which suggests sound, and sound is part of it. But tone, I believe, involves all of the senses. So tone can be a color because it is something that is both a small, and also it can like a gray tone can be like a mist that covers everything, that is a visual kind of metaphor. We also have a chapter where we write about smell. Can an odor also be a tone? We think so, because we think it's something that functions as both, the small, the particular, and the general overall feeling. But it was interesting when my students said that this book was gray. I tried to understand what they mean, and they tried to explain what they mean. Um, and I thought it would be, and they thought it would be because maybe the book has a lot of descriptions of clouds, or it has a lot of gray. There are a lot of gray things in the book. But actually, that wasn't true. What was happening was that there were passages when they were going to show me, okay, what's a gray passage? They showed me a passage which actually did not have any color description. And I think the feeling of gray, not only no color description, but no concrete nouns, nothing like, cup, window, lamp. It was very abstract language. So there was nothing that the senses could grasp. And this, I think, is what made them say gray. Not because of the color gray, but because they couldn't find anything that was speaking to their senses. So they just said, it feels gray. And I think they're right I think that's a good description, actually.
Right. So the tone, is it really the thing that makes you keep a book in hand and never, never, never want it to finish?
Yes, I believe so. I believe so. I also think that there are genres that are almost defined by tone. For example, the genre that we call noir, a thriller, kind of gritty detective story. I mean, we call it noir, which is a word for black, as you know well. And if you try to to define this genre, it's almost a feeling. It's almost defined by a tone. It's the feeling of, the city, and it's dark and it's raining and you're paranoid, and there's a man in a dark hat standing by a wall and you don't know why. All of those things are adding to kind of the tone of that genre. So I think that it's an important element of genre. And it reminds me, I wonder what you think of this. I was talking a couple of months ago to a translator. She actually translates from French to German. And she said two things I found very interesting. One, she said, translators, we don't translate words, we translate universes. And secondly, she said, we work with aura. So
Yeah.
that surrounding aura, not individual words. So I'm curious, I wanted to ask you what you think as a translator.
What I think as a translator, it's universe. I'm 100% agree. The way I work, I don't read the book first. I read some pages at the beginning and somewhere in the book, and then I'm interested in the person who wrote it. I'm looking at what she done, what is her interests, listening to some interviews I do most of the time, and and it's really the universe of the author as a person that I try to understand really, so I can have more of an insider look of the text itself, really, and the atmosphere, the tone. It's, if you want to translate it, you must have a form of empathy for the author. I think you must be somewhat close to what he thinks, to his opinions, his way to consider the life. it can be very difficult for me to translate. It's funny, but to translate passages about food that I don't like myself.
Ah, interesting.
It can be very difficult because I don't have the feeling. For example, somebody who eats I don't know, aubergines. I hate aubergines. Okay, and he's so happy to eat it. At least he wanted it for a year and so on. And it goes against myself, but I must be with the authors. And there is a gap between what we feel in front of the same thing. And it's a gap of empathy that I can do with it. But I have to think about it. And I don't think personally when I translate. I translate, and that's all. I don't think about the word exceptions or when there is a word I don't know or a very complicated grammatical structure, for example. I need to think, but most of the time I don't think because I think I'm not me when I translate. You see, I try to be okay if the author was speaking my language. How would it have write it? And the first pages are a little bit more difficult, but then after it's go on, go on, go on. It's very easy. It's nearly zen, nearly zen. No ego, and there is an emptiness, and the emptiness is now full of the authors and the text, of course. That's how I work. And that's what I think is behind the idea of translating a universe. To translate a universe, you must not be in your universe, and you must be ready to accept it and to take it and sort of empty to have the room for that universe. If you don't have room from something else, from something you didn't write, and from something you aren't, I translated you, I'm not you, you, and I just let it inside me, channeling it in some sort of.
Amazing. This is amazing. I'm very I'm very envious. I'm full of admiration and envy because
Gosh.
this is really like, I mean, first, the idea that you have such a flow in your translation. I mean, as I said, I read some other languages, and I did a translation of a novella by an Egyptian writer named Haitham al-Wardani, because it wasn't in English. And I really love him. I love his work. Some of his work is translated in English, but I wanted to read this particular novella. And I read it in Arabic, but I was like, like I said, if I read in a different language, I don't feel it in the same way as reading my own language. And so I said, I want to just make a basic translation of this story so that I can, receive it and read it as my own language. And I was so bad. And I was the opposite of you because it was like I was in school. I was
Yeah.
so like, oh, the dictionary and every word questioning myself. Did I get that right? This expression. It was like I was so tied to accuracy, and it was not fun. And the result, I mean, it was enough that I could, get a little bit what I want, but the result was not good. And I also just I think this ability, this capacity to be a channel, I think it's a gift. I think it's not something everyone has. I don't know if could someone like me develop it? I don't know.
I think so. I think there are. thousands of Zen monks have done it. Everybody can do it. My theory is you can learn absolutely everything.
I love it.
including channeling. I think you made the mistake. If I can, if I can, I think you made the mistake. You were talking about with the new versions of Russian classics. You tried to be exact. You
Yes.
don't have to be exact. You have once again, you have to have the tone. Really, you have to have the tone. You can be exact if you have the tone. If you have the tone, that's when you reread your work, you are, no, that's not the good word. I think, no, that's not really the good construction. And you work on it. But you work on it as a reader of the work you read to translate it. You're a third stage reader. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, third stage reader at that moment. But at the moment of the translation itself, it's an act. It's not something you must think about. Translate it, and then after you will you can think about the dictionary, the grammar, and the academics. Now, the difference between you and me is that you are an academic. I'm not. Also, yeah, I think it's a great difference. I learned translation by reading books, not. I think I had. Yeah, I had Latin and Greek to translate when I was in secondary school, 12 to 18, Belgium. But then after, never again. And then I learned while reading in English and reading the translation of the books in English I read before and comparisons and so on. And what now? It's not a good thing. Oh yeah, it's so good, very great. You see, and that's maybe why it's more easy to channel for me because I don't care about the academics, about the dictionary. I care about the text, the author. I have a very, very, very in my mind. I met you and some of the authors I've translated, but not at all of them. But I have a very, very, very strong bond of trust with the people I translate because once again it's trust and translating it's not that different from reading to me.
Well, it sounds also to me, it sounds like it is not that different from creative writing. And I think maybe this is the mistake I made in approaching my own, attempt to translate is that, because I am an academic and I'm also a creative writer, and those are two very different kinds of writing. And I think I'm sure that I brought my academic brain to the translation, but I think I needed to bring my writer brain because what you describe that you have the first time you are not thinking, you are channeling. Then you can go back. And that's like the revision. I mean, to me, it sounds like the composition stage of writing and then the revision stage of writing. Because I also, when I'm writing, when I'm composing, which I wish I was doing all the time, I love it. I don't love revision. Revision feels like, oh, I have to go back again. What I love is the composition stage. And in that stage, I mean, if there's music playing, I don't hear it. If I'm in a coffee shop, I don't know. I don't hear anybody. I don't hear anything around me. And I'm not questioning what I'm writing. I'm not asking, was that the right word or no? I'm just feeling it. I'm seeing it. I'm in the scene and I go and I write. And then after that, I go back and fix things. And it sounds like exactly the process you are using in translation.
Yeah, I never thought of that before about creative writing, but it seems really, really similar. The difference is when you do creative writing, you play with your own imagination, and when you're translating, you play with somebody else's imagination.
And that,
That,
yes, that's what makes me envious because
uh,
it
but
sounds so nice. It sounds so nice to me instead of, having to like come up with these ideas myself. It's much more like kind of, it sounds much more even trance like than
yeah,
composing because you have the material. And instead of, making the material and then becoming a channel for it, you just channel. This sounds great. This is what I
yeah.
want. I want to become
Yeah,
a translator.
you
Get
say
it.
this is what I want, but I want the imagination. I don't have enough, I think, to be a creative writer. So grass is always greener and so on.
Yeah, I guess.
Yes, and of course, also that's why I need to know things about the author before really being in the translation. If not, it's artificial. It's not. It's a process. It's not a channeling.
Wow. Okay, well, maybe this is the day that I abandon creative writing and start becoming a translator because it sounds it just it sounds like if you have something you love to translate, then it sounds like it would be the greatest
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah, when you have something you don't love to translate, it's hell on earth. Really, really, it's hell on earth. The real problem is you have to eat, so sometimes you translate things you don't like. Thank God, no, I'm not in that anymore. But oh my God, I translated things I really, not in novels actually, but articles and scientific studies and so on. You can channel. It's funny because you talk about the difference between a story and a research, for example, a research paper. But you can channel when you translate a research paper because you have to be really academic, the good word at the good place. So the scientific process is really, really perfect, top notch. If you can't use when I want translated on Andrea, when I was translating on Andrea, sorry, there is an incredible sentence you wrote when Jevic comes to Bain. And I counted the word, and the sentence is 237 words long. But it's good. It's very important, and that's where the tone is important. It's very important that the sentence is really, really long because it's a way to tell us how Javik is overwhelmed by the part of Ben. And so many words in the so long sentence, you sense, yeah, it's really the sense of overwhelming. So it can be the five cents, but also sense very, very precise. And it's impossible to translate it in the same order with the same things you wrote in English. And I made a very, very long sentence, longer because French takes more words than English, but it's impossible to make it in the exact order you wrote
Yeah.
it. You see, and what I had to do is having that tone, having that sense of overwhelming in French. If you were French, how would you have wrote that sentence?
It's interesting because this is, I think, an example of what we were saying um, about the influence of translated literature on a language. Because when I wrote A Stranger in Alondria was also when I discovered Proust. And so in a way, this very long sentence, I think, is that influence on my English. But of course, yes, you're right. It cannot be in the same order. I really noticed this when we were writing tone, and one of the books we wrote about was The Rings of Saturn by W.G. Sebald, which is an incredible, incredible novel. And we quoted the first sentence of that novel. And I went, because we were talking about tone, I thought, well, I wonder what the German is. So I went and looked at the German. And again, the sentences, it's not a very long sentence, but it's a complex sentence with several parts. And the English version is exactly, as long. It's this all the same parts as the German sentence, but the order has to be different because the German grammar has a different order than the English grammar. And the result was that the English, so the sentence is about how this guy, decided to take a walk because he wanted to overcome this sense of emptiness that he often has when he finishes writing a work. Okay, that's how the English sentence sounds. And it ends with like, when I have completed, a long stint of work. So it ends with the idea of work. But the German sentence ends with the idea of the emptiness.
Wow.
So it makes a different impression as an opening sentence. The focus or the weight of the sentence is more on the emotion and the feeling of the emptiness than the idea of work. So, those are also things that are very interesting to look at in terms of translation and tone. But I do find that translators are, I have so much admiration for them, even more now. But they really, I feel, a good translator really is translating that universe. I had the experience where there was a writer who writes in Arabic that I read in English and I didn't like. And I
Right.
tried, but the writer has a great reputation. So I tried several books. I'm reading them in the translation. And then I finally thought, and I knew the translator was one I usually liked, but I said, I wonder if the problem is that, there's a problem with the translation and I'm not, something's not coming through. So I went to Sudan for 3 years. I went to Egypt for 9 years. I did a PhD in Arabic literature, which took 4 years. So altogether, I'm about 16 years. Then I go and say, now I will read it in Arabic. And I will find what is so wonderful about this writer. And I read it in Arabic, and guess what? I didn't like it. So this means that actually the translator was translating well. That just is how that writer is. And the translator translated the writer very well. And I had to have this long path of travel and study only to discover that actually I just don't like that writer. That's all. It's not the translation.
Great, great story. What is a story? That's a story. Exactly. Oh, okay. Oh my God. 5 minutes. 5 more minutes. Um, what do you want to talk about? As
Well,
always.
I think we should give some book recommendations because
Yeah, of
we were
course.
hoping to collect some. Um, and yeah, I'm wondering, what should I read? What have you read recently?
What have I read
I know
recently?
Jimenez. I know Jimenez. That one is on my list from our last conversation and other conversations.
Frankly, for the moment, I read a lot of Japanese feel good books. Really.
Nice.
Uh, there is nothing in the book, really, which is very Japanese in itself. But the the music, the tone, it's incredible. I read it in French because I don't speak and I don't read Japanese, and really, it's exactly something I read only for the tone. Really, uh, I read. I should have taken some books with me. May I can go and I can come back with some book, but I really like some. I can put some titles in the YouTube comments, and you can see them, and the people can see them. And I think it's very interesting with what we just talked about, because it's books and stories mainly 90% because of the tone. And it's only the tone which makes them interesting. Otherwise, it's people who drink tea and who meet some people and then they drink some more tea. You see?
Yeah. And it's very interesting that it is translated literature as
Yeah.
well. That it's translated literature that is really giving you that feeling. There's one, I'm just trying to see if it's on my shelf. I can't remember the author, but I read it's a Japanese novel from a few years ago. It's called Convenience Store Woman.
Let me check the French title. It rings a bell.
Convenience Store Woman, it's called. And I thought it was so good. And it's just about a woman who works in a convenience store. Like she's just in the store, you know, people come to
Yeah,
the
Sayaka Morata. I read it in French.
yeah, yeah. And I thought it was really lovely. And in fact, I taught it in one of my classes. Yeah, because of that tone. And I also read, there was an academic article in English, of course, that was about the genre. It called it of Japanese literature, and it called it ambient literature.
Yeah.
As in what the literature is about is ambiance. And I think one of the I think Convenience Store Woman may have been one of the books discussed in the article, but it was talking about a whole kind of trend or subgenre of Japanese literature that is ambient literature, that like ambient music, where it's something that it's supposed to kind of fill the space and create a mood more than like have an argument or an important plot. It was very interesting.
That's exactly what I read. I think one name of one author comes in my mind. It's Ito Ogawa, which wrote books about. The one I love the most is about a girl who opens a restaurant in a small village in the mountains, and she drinks lots of tea. There is things there is things of the heart mainly, but nothing spectacular really. Like the ambient literature is really, really, really a good name for it.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's fantastic. Well, I have been reading, to go back to the Russian theme, I have been reading a Russian author who does not have that many books. There are two in English, and I don't know if he has others or not. His name was Leonid Tsipkin. And the first one that I read is called Summer in Baden-Baden. And it's so good. And I've read a second one, which is a collection of his works as well. So he was a Russian Jewish writer in the Soviet period, and he lived his whole life in the USSR. He died in the 80s, I think, maybe 1981 or something. And these books, so Summer in Baden-Baden is about it's in a way a personal story. So it's about there's a narrator who's on a train, he's traveling, but it is also really about Dostoevsky. And it is about Dostoevsky's gambling addiction. And it has, I mean, if you want to talk about a long sentence, the first page is a sentence. And it's perfect because it is about the rhythm. He's on a train and it's about the rhythm of the train. And then it's also about the rhythm of this of addiction, where you have to keep going back, you
Yeah.
win, you lose, you have to return. And it is brilliant. So that's my recommendation.
Yeah, but I think it's time. It's 3:30 p.m. It was a pleasure talking to you, as always.
Thank you so much. For me too.
À vous les studios. I don't hear anything. Maybe we are alone. We can talk a lot
We can
more.
just keep going.
A lot more. I watch the Sandman series from Neil Gaiman's comic books, and
Oh, I haven't watched it.
I thought it's very great. It's interesting because it's a translation in 2024 2024 of a book which was written in 1989 with some all the flavors of this century and this exact period in it, and it's the same stories, the same goals, the same tone, and everything. It's a very, very interesting experience. Did you read the comic books, The Sandman?
I read the first, so the first sort of there's several like big collections of
Mhm.
the comic. So I read the first one. Yeah. And I read it years ago, but I didn't read the whole series. But yeah, it's interesting that you use the word flavor, that it has the flavor of the 80s, because that's again a tone, right? Again, it's something that you sense, very small but very big. A flavor fills everything. Um, yeah, yeah, I should check it out. I didn't continue with the series. And now are you reading it or watching it? Isn't it also
I'm watching it. There is a Netflix
yeah,
series,
yeah.
11 episodes, I think.
Okay.
Uh, and it's very interesting. And it's the translation, sorry, I don't have another word for it, of exactly the book you read.
Yeah,
So it can be interesting anyway,
I should check it
at
out.
least for that. At
Yeah,
least.
I should check it out. I've been watching, well, Keith and I have a project where uh we are watching a lot of science fiction films. And what he did, he got 17 different critics lists of top 10, top 20 science fiction. Then he compiled them together. Then he did something with math, I don't know, but he gave a weight to the different films. So we now have a list of, maybe it's 200, over 200 films. And of course, most of the ones, like the top, we've seen. It's 2001, A Space Odyssey, and, a lot of very famous movies. But once we get down to like 50, then it starts to be, movies we haven't seen. So we are watching them. And some of them are terrible, and some of them are great.
Good. What is the greatest one you saw?
So I really loved um World on a Wire. World
Right.
on a Wire, it's from the 1970s. I want to say 1973. It's a German film. Fassbinder is the director, and
Yeah.
it's long. It was made for TV, so it's like 4 hours long. And it is doing something with virtual worlds and virtual reality that I have never seen before.
Yeah, I just check it on the internet. Sibyl said we must stop.
Okay, so now it's
Check
really
it on,
tough.
on the internet. It's an adaptation, translation maybe, of a book by Daniel Galou called Simulacrum Tree, which has also another, it can be very interesting, you see it, which has also another adaptation, which is called The 13th Floor.
Oh,
In English. I didn't see the German movie, but I really like the American one. You should
cool.
check it with
Okay.
Keith. You tell Keith, Patrick said, check it.
So,
And you
thank
put
you.
it in the DVD reader. Okay, thank you, Sophia. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.
Yes, see you soon.